Good morning, Amy. I am making some mac and cheese today. Not just any mac and cheese. We're going to start out with some bacon, and we're going to add truffle oil to it, and then the aged cheddar, and then bake it with some breadcrumbs on top. So it's something a little different. It's a little spin-off of a classic recipe. Mac and cheese has become very trendy lately, so this is kind of an elegant way to serve it. So to start out, we're going to brown up some bacon. I've got here about 2 slices, a couple ounces of chopped up bacon. I'm going to add that to a saucepan, and we're going to brown that up. All right, so that's going to take a minute or two to brown on up. We're going to let that go. Meanwhile, we're going to make the breadcrumb toppings to go on top. So these are called panko breadcrumbs. You can find them in any grocery store. It's called a Japanese breadcrumb. They're much coarser than most breadcrumbs. And we're going to add melted butter to it. And just kind of toss those all together. Now, if you can't find panko breadcrumbs, you certainly could use regular breadcrumbs. The panko just kind of give a crunchier texture on top of this. All right, so we'll set that off to the side. We're going to go back to our bacon and give it a little stir here. All right, so now we got our bacon nice and crisp, kind of fried up in that fat there. We're going to add some onions and some garlic. It's about 1/4 of a cup of onion and 1 garlic that's been minced up. And we want to saute this up in that bacon fat. Again, adding a little bit more flavor than the usual boxed macaroni and cheese. And while that cooks a little bit, before the show, I cooked off a little bit of pasta. I like elbow macaroni for my macaroni and cheese, but you could use a penne or any other sorts that you like. And what we did is we just boiled this like usual according to the package directions, and then we drizzled it with truffle oil and tossed it around and let it kind of sit here. So truffle oil you can typically find in any specialty store. Black truffle or white truffle oil would work just fine for this. If you don't have truffle oil, you can just substitute an olive oil. You won't get the same flavor, but the recipe will still turn out for you. Okay, so now we're going to go back to those onions and garlic and that bacon, and what we're going to do is make a roux. So we're going to take that bacon fat and we're going to add flour to it. We're just going to sprinkle in a couple tablespoons of flour. And I know it doesn't look like a lot, but this is actually what's going to thicken up our sauce come the end here. So you want to just give that a little bit of time for that butter to kind of brown a little bit. It's going to smell nutty. You can see the bottom of the pan's getting really nice and dark. Part of that's the flour that's toasting. All right, so now you can see in the pan everything's kind of nicely caramelized. You can start to smell a nutty flavor coming off. This is the point where we're going to start to add our half and half. You can use whole milk, you could use heavy cream. I prefer half and half. It gives it a really nice consistency without too much of a fat content to it. And you're going to slowly add this. And when you first add it, it might seem kind of weird. It gets a little thick and it bubbles. You just want to keep adding little pinches here and there. And the half and half you want to have at room temperature. So you want to make sure that it's just either put in the microwave for a few seconds or leave it sit out while you make the bacon process. So we're going to bring this up to a boil. You can kind of see that really nice creamy texture. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. Not too much because that bacon's going to have quite a bit of salt for you. And some good black pepper. Alright, so you can kind of see the bubbles are getting really nice and thick. Just takes about 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute for that flour to kind of adhere to the cream. go ahead and turn it off. And we're going to add a couple cups of sharp, shredded cheddar cheese. And then I've got some chopped up fresh basil that's also going to go in at this stage. So this would be called a bechamel sauce, where you make a roux, which is the flour, and the fat, which is the bacon fat in this application. And you can make this ahead of time, reheat it up when you actually need to put it with your noodles, or if you have any leftover sauce. Perfect. You can see how cheesy, rich. If you were here, you could smell the wonderful bacon side of it. We're going to bring it back over to our noodles here. We're going to toss it with these noodles. Again, really a nice, cheesy, rich macaroni and cheese with bacon and basil. So, if you were in a hurry, you could serve it just like this. But people always ask me, how do you elegantly serve mac and cheese? It has been a trend. People do want to see it on a nicer, higher quality catering menu or a wedding, but they want it to look nice and not just be a big bowl of cheesy noodles. So what I've done is I've gotten ahead and just greased some ramekins. Any size will work depending on if you're doing an appetizer. You can do a little tiny ramekin, or you can do the 8-ounce ramekins here. And we're going to fill them with our mac and cheese. And this is something you could do ahead of time, the day before, a couple days before, and then at the service time, pop them in your oven, make sure they heat up completely, and then you can serve them. It's a very stable recipe as far as being done in advance. Now we go back to those breadcrumbs that we had put those melted butter on, and we're going to go ahead and just load the tops of these up with the breadcrumbs. It adds kind of a crispy crust, and then a little bit more butter, of course, to the already heavy, rich bacon noodles. So now, depending if you made this in advance and pulled it out of your refrigerator and put it in the oven, to now where it's nice and warm and we just want to toast the breadcrumbs, your oven time might range a little bit. I would say about 400 degrees for 10-15 minutes or so at this stage, but if they were cold and room temp, about a half an hour or so in your oven. So we're going to pop them on in, and then the ones that I did just before, it's a little warm yet. You can see how wonderful the breadcrumbs get nice and toasted. It starts to bubble around the side of the ramekin there. And of course, the whole house smells like bacon by the time you're done. Serve them just like this. Put a little more truffle oil on top if you like the truffle oil, and you will have yourself one trendy, fun macaroni and cheese.